If the recognition is always going to come from the result, whatever you won or you didn't win, then you're really missing out on the most important part. The cool part is our lifestyle. That is what's cool. That is what's beautiful.
Welcome back to part 2 with Daniel Bluman. If you missed part 1, pause this right now and listen back to that discussion. Today, get ready because this conversation is a guide to checking your ego at the gate and showing up for your horse.
Dear Horse World, it's Daniel Bluman.
I want to acknowledge what you're talking about is the antithesis of objectification. Do you know what I mean when I say that?
Yeah.
Because being in a sport and being in an industry that buys and sells horses, that the horses are athletes and the horses are a conduit for people to accomplish their goals, especially people who potentially are new to the sport or who are maybe have more access because of their socioeconomic situation. I am really moved by the fact that what you're talking about is truly the opposite of objectifying a horse. That when people, I've heard you and I have both know people who talk about horses and say, well, they're like a piece of equipment to me. And what you're talking about is the opposite of that, Daniel.
Yeah, no, to me, it's nothing to do with that. Like total opposite. I understand, again, the horse is a horse. I understand that we have horses that are intended for business. Nevertheless, the treatment of the horse has to be correct. And I understand that as you're growing up and you have different horses, you own different horses come and go. All of that is understandable. And I'm not saying that you have to have every horse and love it how I love Gemma or Ladriano or Sancha or Corby. I'm not telling you you don't have to have pictures of them and monuments around it. That there's some horses in your life that are different.
Yes.
Okay, I understand that is normal, but every single horse, regardless if you don't even know its name, needs to be treated properly. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. We don't have to go from one end to the other end, right? And that's where people get confused, and the horse is not expecting you to know their name, take pictures of them, post it on social media, make videos, put it in your room. They don't care.
Well, they don't know.
No, they don't know, and they do not care.
Yeah.
All they want to be treated is with respect and empathy, just like they will be treated in nature. In nature, horses get kicked, horses get beat, horses crash with each other,
But there's an innate level of, there's a balance in which, and they also have access to things like you're talking about, which I love that you talked about turnout.
Yeah.
Because the fundamental, you're talking about horses in nature.
Yeah.
Horses in nature have access to friends, forage, and freedom. The fundamental needs, if you look at the prime fundamental needs from a science-backed neuroscience biological level, they need those 3 things just to be able to
live a healthy, balanced life.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I love to hear that someone at your level and at the center of, show jumping in North America here in Wellington, we're here at your place and all the horses are outside.
Yeah, my horses are outside every day from 6:30 in the morning until they come like at 2 o'clock or something. Some of them actually, or multiple of them, go together out, because I think they enjoy it, and because I've seen it with other riders that I respect a lot and ask my questions and overcame my own fears, my personal fears, and they do. Corby goes out with horses. Gemma goes out with horses. I mean, Ladriano went out. So they do. Sancha and Ladriano retired together. They live together. They're in one paddock together, and I believe in nature. And you've said that before, and there's people I respect a lot that come out with the paddocks and all of these, and I mean, I could not voice it more. I mean, I think it's essential, but everyone does what everyone wants. That being said, I think there's the other side that also the community has to understand, and is that sometimes now we see nowadays people that because they lack the knowledge, they're criticizing or judging horsemen by the way that they work with and interact with their horses. And this is also incorrect, because horses are horses, and when you're training horses, you have to give very clear directions, just like the directions that they would get when they're living with each other in the turnout or outside.
Yeah.
So before we go and criticize someone, we should do two things. First, we have to learn ourselves how horses interact with each other and how they train each other, because horses train each other.
Absolutely.
We use horses sometimes to train another horse ourselves in our program.
Absolutely.
So we have to understand how horses train each other, and we have to do a background check on the person that we're about to maybe criticize or cancel, as they say nowadays. Because things that you believe are incorrect out of ignorance, don't make them incorrect. So when you're training a horse, not everything is carrots, treats, and a pat on the back and on the neck. That's not how horses work either.
No.
And you're not going to find someone that is more obsessed with their horses than me. I love my horses. I mean, they're part of the family. They retire with us. They retire in our home. My kids pet them. Sanchez still gets ridden by my kids. She's 20-something years old. I love my horses. But when I'm training and I'm working with the horses, my directions are clear. Because if we don't have good directions to the horses, they don't understand.
But I would argue that clarity is humanity for horses, because
Of course.
clarity, I actually see more dysregulated horses in the world because they're confused and they're not clear on what they're being asked. Then I do see when horses are given clear direction, then I would argue that I see more regulated horses when they have a clear and decisive rider on their back.
For sure. Like I always said, with respect and empathy.
Yes.
With respect and empathy. But when you're training horses, you have to train horses. You're not training a human being. It doesn't work. They're not going to understand.
No.
And you're going to be doing something that is bad for them. I see a lot of horses that end up becoming problematic horses because the people that were training them never recognized the fact that they were horses.
You mean they were treated like
humans,
a human being? Yeah.
Or like a dog, like a pet.
Yeah.
And this is a disservice for the horse, because then this horse ends up creating bad habits.
Yes.
Misbehaving to the point that then the person can no longer ride it.
Yes.
Or work with it.
Yes.
To the point that then the horse is discarded, ends up who knows where, and working for who knows who.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the horse's fault to begin with, but it wasn't also the owner's fault. The owner just didn't know better. So they both ended up hurting each other, and nobody really meant to hurt each other. It was just lack of knowledge, of understanding.
Yeah.
So if there are some listeners or people that are listening to this, I encourage you, and I know that people from every level hear your podcast, learn about the horses. It's all out there. And nowadays you can ask ChatGPT. I'm sorry, is it ChatGPT or GPT? I always say the wrong way.
Yeah.
But you ask the questions and it throws you the answers. Everything is there.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I'm saying here.
Information has never been more available than it is today.
Totally available.
That's very
like
true.
You can study all of you want and understand all of these things is out there.
Yeah, it's very true.
So study and understand the horses. Then the more that you do, the better it's going to be for you and for your horse.
And I would also say too that I think, because I understand where you're coming from, and I think and I talk a lot about this with Dr. Stephen Peters, who's an equine, one of our most reputable equine neuroscientists, and he talks regularly about anthropomorphization, which is when we insert human emotions or we project human emotions onto horses, right? And we go, oh, my horse is sad, or my horse is, we really humanize their emotions. And I think Steve, who is like one of the biggest advocates of horse welfare in the industry from a science-backed point of view, he would tell you that, a horse is a horse and a human is a human. It's really important not to mix them up. And I always say that when we start to get, and I'm guilty of it too, I think a lot of us are who really love horses, it's hard not to become really sentimental. And that sentimentality can bleed into, lack of boundaries with our horses, or letting our horses have less clarity about what we want from them. And I think the best thing you can ever do is you can watch a mare with a foal, and you can get a really good read on how horses are very clear and decisive about the way that they train and communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Right? And that's so important, is if we want to be great horsemen or we want to be great horsewomen, we must look to how horses live and exist and thrive with each other.
Yeah.
Which is why I love, like, I mean, the fact that you turn your horses out, and I mean, we've done work with Carl Hester as a big promoter of Julio Mendoza. Like there's wonderful advocates of turning horses out, and also turning horses out with other horses, because from a neuroscience point of view, your horses actually have a healthier brain.
Yeah.
Which is, and and sometimes I worry that the top of the sport doesn't actually know the science sometimes about those horses are going to have, they're going to have a fundamentally healthier neurochemistry, which means they're going to be able to be thinking horses much easier than they would be if they were socially isolated.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. And I'm happy that, and you know how to articulate those things scientifically much better than me. I started reading about it after I was doing it already.
Yeah.
Because to me, it always made sense, like, and I understood that there were risks and everything, but it just made me feel better. For me, I guess maybe that's my natural instinct and my feeling, and maybe a God-given talent or whatever you want. But that's something that for me, just, I felt that it was what was right. Now, when you start studying it, then you understand why it's right. And why we have to do it, and I think that's one very simple step. The turning out of horses, I think, is just so important. I cannot say it enough times. I think it's important. I'm not saying everyone can have huge fields. I mean, I understand time. There's restrictions in time. There's restrictions in land. In space. But we have to do the best we can. With what we have. But for the horses, I think it's just really important. It's part of the routine.
I was actually watching, I'd be curious what you think about this. So I was watching the Nations Cup in Ocala, and I was thinking about my podcast that I did with Dr. Dennis Brooks, who's he's like the godfather of equine ophthalmology. So he can tell you, like, he's an innovator when it comes to the way that horses see.
Yeah.
And Dr. Stephen Peters and Dr. Dennis Brooks will tell you that a horse that is stalled in a stall all time will actually lose optimal eyesight.
Yeah.
That horses are meant to see on the horizon, and the more stalled they are, the less capable they are of seeing.
Yeah.
And then I was watching, so I was thinking, okay, you already have to, you really want to optimize your horse's sights, especially if you're a competitive show jumper. And then I was also looking at, there was this huge shadow. Did you see that for the Nations Cup? And I was watching people warming up inside, and then they would go outside, and then they would go into this arena that had this huge shadow. And it had this huge shadow going like really poorly placed for the water.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if you look at, and this is why it's so important that, I recognize a lot of horsemanship is actually already here, and science is catching up to be able to prove why we do what we do.
Exactly.
But
because we have inherited these practices from past generations, and now science is coming and telling us why this works.
Exactly, which is important.
We already know it works, but now they're telling us why it works, which is great.
Which is great.
It validates.
It's very validating, I think, for people, and then it allows everyone who's doing it right to stand up and say, hey,
yeah,
we've done this for generations, and now we have all the research to back it.
Yeah.
But I was thinking in that moment, from an equine ophthalmology point of view, I was like, this is already a difficult track. And then I was thinking, if those horses have, if those horses have compromised eyesight, and then you add the additional, it can take between 10 to 15 minutes for a horse's eyesight to adjust from the inside to the outside.
Yeah.
Like, it takes that long. It takes a lot longer than our eyes to adjust. But because our eyes adjust, we think, oh, the horses can see. But they can't.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's so important. And I had heard, and we talk about farming families, and you talk about, and we're going to, I want to reference that a little bit, because it's so interesting that you found that as well, that the really good horse families are the ones that really approach the sport as farmers.
Yeah.
And that mentality. I do think it's really important that we think about all these aspects. It's the horse's life, not just when you're on their back. It's the 360 degrees of their life.
Of course.
Right?
I think that's very important. And to that point also comes into, working outside. I love working outside. I spend most of my rides with the horses outside, like working all the time in the same ring, in the same rectangles and whatever. It becomes boring, and your horse, first of all, doesn't enjoy it as much. For us, it's not as enjoyable because it's nothing better than being outside. And then you're also not training your horse to the maximum potential. When horses know how to work outside, and there's birds, and there's even here we got alligators and ducks and all kinds of birds and animals and stuff. In New York we have deer, we have sometimes we even see bears, we see all kinds of stuff. This is good for them, for them to be able to adapt to the different environment and yet be focused and trusting you. So I think that the more natural you keep it, and the more creative you get, and try to do what others were doing many years ago and still today, in the case of some of these families like you were mentioning, first of all, the experience is going to be more fun. And second of all, it's going to make your horse a better sport horse, which at the end is, it goes hand by hand. You want to be able to do both. That being said, all of these things that we're talking about here need to be done with horse knowledge.
Yes.
Like, it's not like, oh, I don't turn my horse out, so tomorrow I want to turn it out, and then you put it on a field. No, like, you need to know what you're doing. You need to get there, like if a horse never been outside, hasn't been outside in a long time, you want to start first in an environment that it's controlled, that's not so big, and let them ease into it, and then little bigger, and then little bigger, and then eventually turn them on whatever you want. Some horses truly don't want to be in a field that is too big. They want to see some limits because they're very nervous, especially if you turn them out alone. So you have to understand your horses. Same when I say go out and work on the trails and stuff. Ease into it. If you go and you've never done it, and you suddenly go and the horse pulls, you fall, the horse is running, and then, you heard the wrong advice. You want to get to that point. But to get to that point, you have to know the horse. You need to take your time, and you need to work with professionals, know what they're doing, so you can get to that point. So that is just something that maybe in the community starts to lack, because obviously, like, there's less horsemen than there were before. So a lot of the things that are happening, and people are being taught by professionals that are not real horsemen, so then all of these things start to happen, so everything that people discuss, and everything that you read, and everything that you can get access to now with the internet and everything, you still have to make sure you follow with a proper professional and horseman, because you don't want to get hurt. You don't want your horse to get hurt, and we can avoid accidents that are many times unnecessary. So it is very complex, like we said at the beginning.
It's simple in some ways. Like, the right things are simple, but it's also complex.
It is very simple once you know it. And you feel it and you live with it. Then it's super simple. It's like, whatever. I mean, that's like obvious. But it isn't obvious. It's complex. For us that didn't grow up with horse family or horse knowledge, and we've had to live the process to get here, is very complex. I'm sure that for my son, it's going to be obvious because it's obvious. It's what he's seen since he was young, since he was little. So for him, those things are obvious, but it's not obvious.
Well, and it's so interesting because I think before we pressed record, I was saying that this is what I find so funny, knowing, the Whitakers, I know the Whitakers. They're they're a wonderful example of how, good horsemanship is they're just like, it's simple. Everything is simple. And so when you're talking to them, whenever I have them in front of me in an interview, or whether I'm working with them, I'm always like, okay, one of the biggest challenges is being able to glean out all of the things that are so obvious to them, but are not necessarily obvious to everybody else, right? Because they have generations and they come from a farming background. So they and even, it's so funny that Jack and he'll describe his family, like, we're just farmers, we just ride horses now. But we still have such a farming mentality about the way we keep horses and the way we work with each other and how everyone shows up on the yard. And it's actually funny because one of the things, so when you're talking about easing into horses, turning out, for example, or doing something like being out in the world and being outside more, it's interesting because immediately what comes up for me is predictability is one of the key dopamine hacks for horses. So dopamine is a really important compound for our horses and for us, right? And so predictability is one of the things that is required for horses to stay regulated. It's like and what's interesting is when you look at yards that are run by farming families or who take a farming mentality, everything is very predictable. The schedule is like very precise.
Yeah.
Horses are turned out for the same amount of time, they're eased into it. So what I see, which again science is catching up to, is I see management of horses with a tremendous consideration for their nervous system.
Yeah.
Right? You're not seeing these huge spikes in cortisol, you're not seeing huge stress hormones, you're seeing a lot of consideration for horses to remain in the parasympathetic.
Yeah.
Rest and digest. You're not going to get as much issues of colic. You're going to have a happy horse. It's amazing how the science is catching up to how old families have been doing this forever.
Yeah.
Right.
And at the end, and for them, and then applies for me now in a more personal thing, routine is so important for horses, and routine is so important for Daniel. I mean, I'm telling you.
At Conaway & Associates Equine Insurance Services, they understand how special your horse is. That's why I personally chose to work with them to insure my horses before we embarked on this epic journey across the country. I chose them because their agency writes coverage in 48 states. They also work with several A-rated admitted insurance carriers, so you have options and can select the insurance coverage that best suits your own unique needs. Having confidence in my insurance selection allows me peace of mind on this journey. I can focus on my horses and embrace these learning opportunities of a lifetime. Who better to trust with the insurance of your horse than a team of fellow horse people? Conaway & Associates was founded in 1992 by Laura Conaway, herself a Grand Prix show jumping rider. Laura and her experienced team have built a strong reputation as a reliable partner, building relationships through service, trust, and understanding. Explore www.conaway.net or call them for competitive, personalized insurance coverage options from their team of like-minded equine insurance professionals.
Routine is so important for horses, and routine is so important for Daniel. I mean, I'm telling you. My routine, I can become, and I can start losing my control over my head and my peace within.
Yeah.
And I identify a lot with the horses in that respect. Routine is just so healthy for them, and just like it is so healthy for me. And you start creating routines for these horses when at home and when outside the home. When you leave, how they travel, how they arrive to the show, how you work them at the show, when you work them at the show, and all of these routines create peace within, like you say, health, which is very important. I mean, knock on wood, I think that when you look at some of the best horsemen, the careers of the horses last for many years.
Yeah.
The horses are very healthy. When they have injuries, like any athlete can have an injury, they normally come back.
Yeah.
It's not like a career-ending injury. Nowadays, with those horsemen, they find the ways, or we find the ways to bring those horses back with the time and the help of the vets. And so at the end, being a horseman is so rewarding in so many ways. And I'm going to even touch a different part of it, the economics of it. Okay.
I'm so glad you talked about it. Yeah.
Because obviously we need to make a living. I mean, you like horses? Yeah, that's great. And young kids say, I want to be a rider, I want to be something with the horses. And that also is very beautiful. The fact is that we're not 18 forever. We end up growing up. We need to then eventually want to have a house or an apartment, or we need to own a car, and then eventually maybe we want to get married, maybe we want to have kids. Life happens and life is expensive.
Yeah.
And we need to make a living somehow. Well, I'm always going to say to anybody that a good horseman is always gonna make a better living than a good rider. Always. First of all, because they're scarce. So that makes huge difference. There's more good riders than there is good horsemen. So it's a better commodity to be a good horseman than to be a good rider. And every single barn, regardless of level that the owner is competing or whatever, needs horsemen. So horsemen are always going to be well remunerated. I said earlier in our chat, there's a big number of horsemen that I know, that I have huge respect for. I like them also a lot as friends because we identify with many things. They make a great life.
Yeah.
They earn a lot of money per year. They do great in our industry, in our business. Never competed in a Grand Prix. Never competed in a Grand Prix. Many of them never jumped past meter 40. Many of them didn't get to compete because they didn't have the resources when they were young to compete.
But that's not a reflection of their ability.
No, not at all. They're horsemen. Kimmy, you want those people around. You want them to be in the barn when something happens. You want them to be in the barn when you're working with a horse. You want them to be in the barn when you're developing a young horse. You want them to be in the barn when a horse is sick. You want them to be in the barn when a horse just arrived. You want them to be in the barn when the horse is about to leave. You want them to be in the truck when the horse got sick or is not feeling well. You want them to be in the truck when the horse is traveling far or is going in the airplane. And I can give you a million examples. This is the people you want to be there so that you're not stuck to your phone in alert and panicking. So these people are indispensable in our industry. Make yourself indispensable. Become a horseman. You become a horseman, you're going to have a good life. If you were able to become a horseman, and on top of that, things happened, and you ended up being able to be also a good rider, a successful rider, and you ended up also being a good entrepreneur because now you also have to be that.
Yeah.
This industry is so complex. Then you might just end up being one of the best riders in the world ranking. You know, because the best riders in the world ranking don't necessarily mean that they were the best riders or the best horsemen. Many things have to happen, you know, in order to get there. But the number one thing that is going to at least secure your life in this industry is horsemanship. Become a good horseman, and then that already is an insurance. Anything that happens after that, you know that you're going to have a good life in this industry, which you're very lucky for.
Yeah. It is like one of the, I mean, we're biased, but I would say like if you can work in the horse world, it's like the greatest life
in so many ways.
in so many ways.
Look how we grew, you know, because of the influx of resources and money and, you know, all these different things. You can make a great life out of being in this industry. You can make money, you can own a place, you can be in beautiful places, you can be obviously doing what you love, you know, so there's so many great possibilities because the industry grew so much.
Yeah.
Many years ago, we could say there were many great things, but you could have been a great horseman and have no money.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
None.
Oh, there are some of the greatest horsewomen that have been referenced in this podcast. They left this world, they passed with very little money to their name.
Exactly.
And they're referenced in books. They wrote books. They are like, some of them are the godfathers of the way we do things as horses. And they left the world with very little economically.
So we are in a great situation.
Yeah.
In some aspects.
In some aspects, yes.
In some aspects, we're not. In some aspects, we're facing intersections where decisions need to be made. But I mean, okay, I'm an optimist by nature anyways. I think we're in a great place.
Yeah.
I think we just have to continue to educate people the right way, especially younger generations, and make sure that we give the recognition to the people that deserve the recognition.
I'm glad you said that because I think it's like, how can we, because the direction of the industry is a contribution of a million trillion different micro decisions made by tons of different people all at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not, I think it's incorrect to believe that a group of people in a room somewhere will determine the trajectory of the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
However, there are a lot of influencing factors, one of which is the representation of the industry. The second is, I think, you know, now because of social media and because of the media attention of horse sport, social license has become a topic.
Yeah.
I think if you had asked riders 20 years ago whether riders in the 21st century would be discussing social license to exist, they would be shocked, right?
Yeah.
Because horses have been such a big part of our history as a species since time immemorial.
Yeah.
But I think we do have a responsibility, and that's where I'm really glad. I feel like as we wrap up this episode, I really want you to speak to this responsibility we have, and in the social media age, is how are we representing ourselves and what are we really valuing in people as representatives of the sport? Like, you're an ambassador for the sport, I'm an ambassador for the sport. I worry that people think that the way they live their life is not a representation of the sport, but it is, because you talk about who we are behind closed doors is who we are when all the lights and the cameras are on you as a rider, right? It's what you do in when no one's looking that actually defines you as a horseman. But I would say that a lot of the environment that we live in would tell you the opposite.
Yeah, and that's not even a horse problem. I mean, that's a human problem. Social media and the recognition and validation has become an epidemic.
Yes.
It's a serious problem. So the first thing that I would say is, I cannot tell you don't think about it or totally ignore it, because that's a lie. Most likely, most people are not going to be able to do that, me included. So let's manage it. Let's manage how much recognition we're expecting to get. Let's manage how much validation we're expecting to get. Let's manage how affected we can be by the lack or the excess of validation or recognition. And let's understand that at the very, very, very end, on the essence of life, that recognition, that validation, social media, and all the rest mean nothing. So keep very present that part. That being said, we do, as ambassadors of the sport, because we're working with animals and with everything that is happening in the canceling culture and all this kind of stuff, have to be aware. I wouldn't say careful, I would say aware.
Yeah.
That everything that you put online could be misrepresented. It could create an issue. It could backfire on us and end up making people that do not understand our industry judge us very harshly, without the understanding and the full picture to judge us. So we have to be careful what we are trying to represent when we ourselves are sharing anything in social media or anything like that, so that it's a very clear message of what we're trying to say, that on us. And maybe on the media, and for the people that sort of make things viral and share a lot of content and whatnot, be careful what you're trying to validate or recognize. Because if the recognition is always going to come from the result, from the winning, the picture with the cooler, and whatever you won or you didn't win, then you're really missing out on the most important part. The cool part is our lifestyle. That is what's cool. That is what's beautiful. What we're able to do with these horses, with our teams. We have beautiful places where we work out of. We travel the world to some other beautiful places. We travel the world to some other beautiful farms, and to some other beautiful facilities of other people that do what we do and love it the way we do, in different continents and areas of the world. And that's magical, because each area has its charm.
Yeah.
So let's try maybe to post about that. You want to share that, share that. But if all you're sharing and all you're commenting and all you're recognizing is the blue ribbon or the win or all these things, you're really missing out. Because to get to that, there's so many great things that happened before that really make that special. So the combination of education, of working together as a community, of crossing our fingers, hoping that we get lucky and we make more good decisions than bad ones, is going to determine where the industry is 20 years from now. I said I'm an optimistic type of person, so I think that we're going to be in a great place, and I will try to do my share just like you do yours, so that we get to that point.
This is something that I think everyone's going to feel. I have a sense that after everyone listens to this episode, they're going to feel a little bit more validated in their own journey. Because one thing I've learned, having traveled, like I took my horses and traveled 25,000 miles last year, traveling and riding with different types of people from different corners of the horse world, to really understand the universal threads that connect us, right? What do you have in common with a rancher, or Buck Brannaman in Wyoming? There's a lot.
That's really cool. You're so lucky.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. And one thing I will tell you and I can tell you with so much certainty, is that magic happens between horses and humans like all over the world every day.
Yeah.
And that there are great horsemen and great horsewomen. And like that's what was so exciting for me to talk to you, because when I realized that you and I shared this belief that there are great horsewomen and horsemen all over the world. And many of them, majority of them will never be recognized.
Yeah.
But that's also what makes them great, is that they don't care to be recognized, that they're doing it for the right reasons. And I really want everyone in the horse industry to hear that,
Yeah.
to say like, you can be great and you don't need to be Instagram famous or winning a whole bunch of Grand Prix money or be a professional. Like you can be a really talented, wonderful horseman and never have that like community acknowledgement, maybe the way that someone else might. And I'm sure like the both of us would say like you can understand how that might be frustrating for some people. But I think that for time immemorial, that's been happening. No one in the history of humans and horses, no one was running around with a camera acknowledging that magic.
And at the very end, anyways, most people in the world, regardless of what they do or they don't do, are not going to be recognized. So let's start by that.
Right.
You know? And even the ones that get recognized today and not recognized tomorrow.
Right.
So at the very end, recognition doesn't mean a great match, you know, because you're a hero today and you're a monster tomorrow, or the other way around, and, you know, everything else. So who you want to be recognized by, if at all, is your close friends and your family. That's it. People that really know you. If you are in the horse world and you own horses and you work with horses, you have exponentially increased your chances of living a happy, balanced life. So begin with that.
Yeah.
You know, that already is a win.
Like you're already winning.
That is a win. You're already winning. If you pass to the point that you actually become a horsewoman or horseman, you're now really winning, because now you're really spending time doing something great, sharing an exchange of energy with an animal that is absolutely majestic. And on top of that, you're going to start building a small community around you of other people that love what you love, that are also horsemen or horsewomen, that are going to just make it that much more fun. So there's no losing here. It's only positive and positive stuff, as long as you're looking at it the right way. Again, people want recognition, people want validation, all that kind of stuff, and it's okay. We just have to manage it. We just have to understand that that's not really what's important. It doesn't matter.
Amen. I couldn't put it better myself. So as we wrap up, I'm so excited to hear your questions, or to hear your answers to the questions that I have for every guest that comes on this podcast. If you could read one book to the horse world, what would it be?
Oof. One book to the horse world. One book to the horse world. Let me think, because I want to make sure that I tell you one that really had a huge impact on me. I want to tell you one, actually, because you've already had by some guests tell you some that like a lot. The Peter Fredrickson one, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
You heard it before, but there's one that most people haven't read. Maybe most people don't even know it exists, but I think it's fantastic. It's the one by Margie Engel. Margie Engel has a book that her mom wrote. May she rest in peace, her mom. It's called No Hurdle Too High.
Okay.
I read it when I was in 6th grade, and it's the story of Margie Engel, pretty much, told by her mother. Up to that point, so in 6th grade, that's 2001. I think that book is fantastic. I think it shows you how the dreams of a horse girl, horse woman, and passion of the sport came to be true against adversity. And I think it's a really fulfilling book. You know, when you finish reading it, you feel good about yourself. You know, I think it's a book that anybody, regardless of their level, and I'm talking anybody, regardless of any level, will appreciate. 6th grade, I was just another kid that loved horses. I knew nothing, had done nothing, but I loved horses. And I read that book and I absolutely loved it. So there you go. And if you haven't read it, you should read it yourself.
I'm gonna.
I don't even know how you can get a copy nowadays, but I'm sure if not, ask Margie. She for sure has to have a copy.
I'll ask Margie. Who is the most iconic horse in history?
Ooh, yeah, that's really difficult to say. I really cannot tell you one. I honestly could not. I could not choose one. It would be a complete. It would be just so unfair to so many that I decline to answer that question.
I love that for you. Okay. Most undervalued skill as a rider.
Empathy.
Hmm. Who is the greatest horseman or horsewoman in history?
I decline to answer that question. It would be again totally unfair. It would be. I mean, I've had the influence of some great ones, but I've also read about some other great ones and met some other great ones for sure. I will not mention one, but I can tell you that that there's a good many
Yes.
incredible horsemen.
You know, I'll add to that answer because I love that answer. And I'm not mad about that answer. I actually love that answer. And the other one that I love is we'll never know.
Yeah.
That the greatest horseman or the greatest horsewoman out there is in the far reaches of some place just doing what they do with horses, and they will never be known and they will never be acknowledged like we talked about, and they will just, and because they're experiencing magic every day, and that's enough.
And not only that, every great horseman has had a mentor or mentors, not one, many mentors.
Yes.
And those mentors had mentors, and those mentors had mentors. So then who's the greatest horseman?
Exactly. I love that. It's like the tree of knowledge.
Of course. That's passed generation to generation. So who is the best horseman? And I've met some cowboys, some ranchers. I met people around the world that are incredible horsemen. You know, someone taught them.
True.
Now, I haven't had the chance to work in the native communities of North America.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that those guys have some incredible horse sense and knowledge. They also work with horses in different methods than us. So,
Yeah.
And the world has a lot of great horsemen.
They do. And final question, and I'm very interested to know your answer to this. Mares, stallions, or geldings?
You know, that's a complete personal preference. I'm going to tell you, my personal preference is mares. It's just a personal preference. I just really have always enjoyed very much working with the mares. It's just something about their personality and just the way that they're wired that I've grown to understand very, very well and to respect very much. And because of that understanding and how well we've done together, that would be my preference. That being said, you know, I'm always open to learn, especially more about the stallions, because I don't have enough knowledge about the stallions. So I wouldn't say that I don't like them because I don't like them. I don't like them because I don't understand them quite as well, just because I haven't had enough interaction with them. And when it comes to geldings, you're always safe.
Yeah.
You know, a great gelding is a great gelding, and geldings are just out of the three for sure the easiest to work with. But I would pick the mare just because I like that edge that the good mare gives me, which the stallion cannot give me because I'm ignorant. I don't know enough how to work with them because I haven't been exposed to as many as I have been to mares.
Yeah.
So I recognize that, and for that, and because of my limited amount of time that I can only work with so many horses a day, I tend to walk around and they tell me how many mares
I know. I love it. Your barn's like my barn. I'm total team mare all the way.
Exactly. So,
well, Daniel, thank you so much. This podcast totally lived up to my expectation and more. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was great. We had a lot of fun.
Today's episode is brought to you by Conaway & Associates Equine Insurance Services. The friendly and knowledgeable team at Conaway & Associates brings together more than 30 years of experience to offer a wide range of insurance services, including horse insurance, farm insurance, and liability insurance. Visit www.conaway.net to explore options or get in touch today.